Los Angeles police officer Florence Powell won't testify in his own defense in the King beating trial. IBM, the layoffs begin just as the new boss gets an $8 million deal. And on America Close Up tonight, the NAACP, a midlife passage or midlife crisis?
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. A major portion of the defense rested this evening in the federal trial of the 4 Los Angeles police officers charged with beating Rodney King. This came on a day of dispute over what had caused King's head injuries. NBC's George Lewis is at the Los Angeles courthouse with us tonight. George?
Tom, Lawrence Powell's attorney rested his case without calling Powell to the stand. It was exactly 1 year ago today that Powell testified in the original trial of the 4 policemen.
Do you know how tall Mr. King is?
In that trial last year, Powell was asked about where the baton blows landed.
Did you hit him in the head?
No.
Did anybody say anything about hitting him in the head at any time?
I heard Sergeant Kuhn yell, "Don't hit him in the head."
And had you hit him in the head ever?
No.
That was an important point in that trial, and it's an important point the second time around. Hitting people in the head with batons violates Los Angeles Police Department policy because it can be fatal. There has been conflicting testimony in both trials about whether Rodney King was hit in the head. Today, over the strong objections of the prosecution, the defense played this computer simulation of the beating. The defense contends that King's facial bones were broken when he fell to the pavement. A defense expert in biomechanics, Carly Ward, testified that King fell when police used a taser, an electronic stun gun, on him. Ward used this video demonstration of a volunteer being shocked to show the violent contortions that the taser produces. She later faced tough cross-examination from prosecutors who pointed out that her expert testimony in other trials had been discredited. She never testified in the original trial of the policeman. Without Powell's testimony, it's been pretty much a battle of the experts in this trial of late. Tom?
Thank you, George Lewis in Los Angeles tonight. And NBC law correspondent Star Jones, a former New York prosecutor, is also following these legal strategies. She's with us tonight from Los Angeles as well. What about this idea of not putting Powell on the stand? Why did they do that, Star?
Actually, Tom, I spoke with Lawrence Powell earlier today, and as a result of that conversation, I started to get the impression that they were relying on the evidence that was already in. Sergeant Kuhn taking responsibility for directing his officers that evening. The use of force expert talking about reasonableness and that the incident was within policy of the police department. It's clear the theory is Lawrence Powell is not needed on the stand.
You've been in a lot of courtrooms, Star. Does the jury begin to get a little suspicious, however, when a defendant does not take the stand in his own defense?
Most times they do, but they will be instructed, just like every criminal jury is instructed, that they cannot consider that as evidence against Lawrence Powell. The burden is on the prosecution to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a big gamble to take whether or not there's enough evidence in already to raise a reasonable doubt. Tom?
Thank you very much, NBC law correspondent Star Jones tonight in Los Angeles at the federal trial in the Rodney King beating case. In Texas, meanwhile, the Waco standoff now is in the hands of lawyers, it turns out. The FBI is temporarily out of those discussions. It is day 32 and still counting. NBC's Jim Cummins still is on the scene tonight. Jim?
Tom, there are now 2 lawyers talking to the Branch Davidians about coming out. The FBI insists they are not part of the negotiations, but the authorities are glad to have some help. For the 3rd day in a row, Dick DeGuerin, a high-powered criminal defense lawyer, went into the compound for a face-to-face meeting with David Koresh. This followed more than 8 hours of meetings with the self-proclaimed Messiah before today. So, is he ready to come out?
I'm going to have to meet several times with David. We have very substantive, important matters that we're discussing, and we're making real progress.
Perhaps another sign of progress, another lawyer, Jack Zimmerman, has talked by telephone with his client in the compound, Koresh Lieutenant Steve Schneider.
They want to come out. They're not desirous of having any kind of a shootout. When the appropriate time comes for me to go in there, I'm ready to do so.
FBI agent Bob Rick says there is a limit to all this lawyering.
We do not want to get in a situation where we have 100 different attorneys going into that compound. We could be here till next fall.
Both lawyers say Koresh and his followers want assurances they will be treated fairly and will be able to get their message out. The FBI turned down the volume on its noise effects outside the compound last night. Belinda Gainham is glad. Her son is one of the Koresh followers. She believes harassing them strengthens the hold Koresh has on them.
We want the people inside to start questioning. We want them to think for themselves. We want them to want to be out of this situation.
The lawyer DeGuerin returned to the compound at mid-afternoon and is out now. These are the autopsy reports of the 4 ATF agents who were slain in the original shootout. In the reports, the autopsies show that 3 of them died of massive gunshot wounds to the head. Tom?
Thank you very much, Jim Cummins. Tonight, still in Waco, Texas, in New York. There was an arrest warrant issued today for still another suspect in the World Trade Center bombing, the 6th so far. He's a 25-year-old Muslim who lived in the same New Jersey apartment building as one of the other suspects in this case. And when Nightly News continues in a moment, the refugees of Bosnia, a story of deadly escape and desperate journey. And tonight we'll introduce you to Don Wardlaw, broadcaster, baseball visionary.
Not to be confused with Joe B. Hall.
Simon, I've got a clogged drain. What do I do?
I've got a hardware store full of things you could try. But I just got something in that's so strong, so fast, it's all you need. Liquid Drano Professional Strength Plus. Drano Plus has a unique, thick formula with more power than the leading regular strength product. That's a plus. So much power it churns and busts through tough clogs. That's a big plus. Don't mess with anything else.
I won't.
So thick, so strong, so fast. That's the plus in Drano Plus.
Day 4 of the show. The magician is performing for the kids. I thought the dancers stole the show last night. I put on quite a show in aerobics this morning. I can see why Royal Caribbean has won so many awards. I can see it in John, our cabin steward, and Ted, our wine steward. Watching people with this much pride is quite a show in itself.
You've got some Royal Caribbean coming.
No one is calling it an outright threat, but the Clinton administration today did accuse 44 countries of unfairly closing their markets to American products, and Japan was singled out as the worst offender. U.S. Trade Ambassador Mickey Cantor predicted hard-nosed negotiations, maybe even trade sanctions. There are big changes, meanwhile, for IBM, the computer giant long known as Big Blue. On one hand, the first layoffs in its 79-year-old history. On the other, a new chief executive with no personal money worries. NBC's chief financial correspondent is Mike Jensen.
The bottom line is...
Laid off IBM workers at a local bar.
It's almost like a funeral that's finally here. It's like somebody, you were waiting for someone to die, and now it's over, and now we can mourn.
They're mourning the end of an era. IBM's first firings, a terrible embarrassment.
I was told to conduct myself in an IBM professional manner and to curtail any interviews or that sort of thing to protect the IBM image.
It's been a tough time for IBM. It had to hire an outsider to run the company, Louis Gerstner, who had been at RJR Nabisco, and said this.
IBM's people look to IBM to be a creative and exciting place to work.
Exciting for him, his pay package was announced at the same time the workers were being fired. A $5 million bonus just for signing up with IBM. Another $2 million a year in base salary, plus $1.5 million a year in possible performance bonuses. Also, stock options that guarantee him $500,000 for every $1 increase in the price of IBM stock. Those options will be worth almost $50 million if IBM stock gets back up to its 1986 levels. Analysts say all that money will be worth it if Gerstner can make IBM profitable. But the fired workers say they wish their former bosses had done the job. Mike Jensen, NBC News, New York.
The economy, of course, is job one for President Clinton, and today, 70 days after he took office, House and Senate Democrats announced their agreement on Clinton's plan to cut the deficit. Congressional votes now are expected within 24 hours. The past few months have been a rite of passage in Washington, particularly for the 110 new members of the House. Elected to shake things up, they came to town ready for a fight, and like freshmen everywhere, they found one. NBC's Lisa Myers tonight.
From the beginning, they were viewed as potential troublemakers. What bothers me about Congress...
Elected, promising to change the system, often preaching what their Democratic elders viewed as heresy.
I mean, a lot of us are pushing for more cuts in federal spending.
Their mini revolt forced Democratic leaders to vote on deficit reduction before voting to increase spending. Freshman Democrats further annoyed old-timers when, led by Luis Gutierrez, they pushed a bill to deny Congress a scheduled pay increase.
One of the senior members asked me not to be introducing legislation which he termed as putting my hand in his pocket.
The final straw came in the last few days when reformers prepared an assault on congressional perks, hoping to force members to give up free parking at National Airport, give up frequent flyer miles earned on government-paid trips, even pay for parking on Capitol Hill.
When the public sent 25% of the House as new members, they expected us to really go through this place with a fine-tooth comb.
That was then. Today, the freshmen folded under pressure, unveiling a reform package designed to offend no one. No mention of parking, nor of other perks.
The other things, when you get right down to it, they're symbols. Let's talk about real, not symbols.
What happened? Some would call it seasoning. The freshmen got a lecture from Speaker Foley and complaints from more senior colleagues.
So we've increased the cost of the barber, we've increased the cost of the gym, we increased the cost of a shoe shine. What are we talking about?
Congressman Charles Rangel of New York says the freshmen had gone bonkers.
Hey, we shouldn't get paid at all. That maybe we should pay for just coming here.
Until now, many freshmen said they didn't care what their elders thought because they were more in touch with voters.
But we get it. We were the class of 1992, and the message in 1992 was different from the message ever before.
But one thing isn't different. This class has learned that getting to Washington was the easy part. Change comes much harder. Lisa Myers, NBC News, the Capitol.
And from the business world tonight, a good idea gone wrong. A European division of the Maytag Corporation had an idea to boost sales. A free airline ticket with the purchase of a new appliance. Well, it worked out all too well. More than 200,000 customers responded. That cost the company some $30 million extra. 3 executives of that division have been fired. It was a mixed day on Wall Street today. The Dow Industrials fell sharply. Trading today was very heavy.
So, what brings you to Clausen?
I'm looking to cook pickles. I'm a pickle cook. Pickles are what I cook. Gherkins, crickets, dill, spears, chunks, chips. You name it, I'll cook it.
We don't cook our Clausen pickles.
You're kidding.
I never kid.
What about shelf life?
What about shelf life?
Most pickles sit on a shelf. You sit on a shelf. You've got to be cooked. I'm your guy. I'm a pickle cook.
What about taste?
What about taste?
We're just kind of picky about taste.
Unlike most pickles, Clausen pickles are never cooked. They're always cold, always crisp, always delicious.
Don't cook your pickles. That's funny.
Let's clear the air. Despite what some headache pain relievers may have led you to believe, there's something to relieve pain that almost everyone can take without simple stomach upset. What is it? Genuine Bayer, America's #1 aspirin.
Dear Thompsons, I use Thompson's Water Seal waterproofer on my redwood furniture. My brother-in-law Louis used another brand on his redwood gates. After intense rain, my furniture was like new. His gates swelled shut. Thompson's has no match. Sincerely, Lowell Salzer.
Imagine a pillowy cushion of softness with every step you take. Dr. Scholl's 2-layer air pillow insoles. 1 layer for shock, 1 for comfort. Dr. Scholl's. You'll feel better when the doctor is in.
If your business gives up the quality of AT&T International Long Distance and calls Italy with someone else, here's your big savings.
3 coins in the fountain.
Leaving AT&T doesn't make a lot of sense.
The UN Security Council late today put some muscle into that ban on Serb military flights over Bosnia. It said that NATO planes may shoot down violators of the no-fly rule. In Bosnia, meanwhile, the carnage goes on tonight. New reports of Serb forces destroying villages near Srebrenica. Some Muslim refugees did manage to flee that besieged city, but as NBC's Rick Davis reports, their escape was a nightmare.
Even their journey from fear was a terrible thing. Over 2,000 Muslims from Srebrenica fled the horror of that city on these 20 UN buses. The waves of children at their moment of freedom were weak. The smiles rare. 6 people died, suffocated in the crushes. Thousands tried to board the buses. 30 to 40,000 people are trapped in that city. The body of one child was carried away. The people were lightly clothed, many shoeless in the bitter cold. They were brought to a sports center in Tuzla. It is their hospital and temporary home. A doctor and nurses examined the two children of this young woman. One suffers severe frostbite, but the doctors said they would be well. This woman brought her two children and 3 orphans out. How would you describe Srebrenica? What is it like now?
Awful, terrible, impossible. Houses are destroyed, people are living in the streets.
There are those who disagree with this UN effort, who say that by bringing Bosnian Muslims out of Srebrenica, the United Nations is helping the Serbs ethnically cleanse that city. They believe Srebrenica must remain a symbol of Muslim defiance. But these are the faces of the many who have suffered too much. One UN worker said, panic is at an all-time high. The community has lost faith in the UN to protect them there. This is the mother of one of the children who suffocated during the escape. She said they brought her daughter here already dead. What happened to her child?
We got in the truck and he suffocated. He was 6 years old.
Nurses often fought back tears as they worked.
I can't believe what I see.
Could you live with the Serbs again?
Could I? I don't know. I really don't know. I like to, but could you forgive?
Looking around this room, that is a hard question to answer. Rick Davis, NBC News, Tuzla.
In Washington today, it was the second day of Senate hearings on gays in the American military. Among those testifying today, Dr. Lawrence Korb. He's a former Reagan Defense Department official who helped create the ban on gays, but now he says this policy should end.
I find no convincing evidence that changing the current policy would undermine unit cohesion any more than the other social changes that society has asked the armed forces to make over the past 50 years.
A freak accident on a North Carolina movie set today killed actor Brandon Lee, hit in the abdomen by a projectile from a gun that was supposed to be shooting blanks. Lee was the son of the late martial arts legend, Bruce Lee.
Today, 2 airlines share one vision: to join the world together as never before. Announcing the global alliance of U.S. Air and British Airways. Now, there are no boundaries.
I knew something must be wrong. I was getting these sharp pains, and sometimes pressure and bloating. I'm glad I asked my doctor. He said it was gas and recommended Mylanta gas.
Mylanta gas. It has the best medicine for gas.
For the many forms of nighttime pain, now there's a new form of nighttime pain relief, our unique Tylenol PM gel cap. The only pain reliever with a gentle ingredient to help you sleep in an easy-to-swallow gel cap. Tylenol PM.
Impossible! How can you store 8 rolls of Charmin in that tiny space?
By squeezing, Chief.
You see, moms need more storage space.
So we're taking 8 rolls of Charmin and squeezing them.
Great idea! We'll call it Space Maker.
So you can store twice as much in about the same space, so you don't run out.
And it pops back out again.
Glad I thought of it.
Try new Charmin Space Maker.
Remember, if it's not squeezably soft, it's not Charmin.
America Close Up tonight, the NAACP. It's the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. And with Executive Director Benjamin Hooks retiring after 15 years, the group is debating its own future. Critics say it is out of touch with the needs of most African Americans. Here's NBC's national correspondent, Bob Kerr.
You knew what was what in those days.
60-year-old Abner Darby recalls when the suburban Boston NAACP chapter he led had 1,100 members. Now it's down to 275 because, he says, times were different back then.
It was out blatant discrimination, and at that time you knew exactly where you stood. You sit on the back of the bus, you was look at the water fountains, was said colored only, white only.
Days when black Americans risked their lives to vote or eat at whites-only lunch counters are long gone. Now, talk show host Joe Madison, an NAACP board member, says a new generation has new concerns.
Our young people are telling us, for example, thank you. We have our rights. We have justice to some degree. But now, how do we become entrepreneurs?
The NAACP is at a crossroads, torn by those urging that it stay focused on the fight against racism, and others who want more direct action on unemployment, drugs, and teen pregnancy.
They should become, at the community level, actively involved in some of the issues you raised.
Now is the time.
It's been 30 years since a huge March on Washington ended here at the Lincoln Memorial, providing momentum for passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But now that the big legal battles have been won, the interests of a growing black middle class often differ from those of the poor black underclass.
Surely they're indifferent, blacks who have made it and who don't give a rap. There are blacks who have decided that the NAACP is not the vehicle.
We have an awful lot of minority people out there who fail to see the relevancy of the NAACP, and I think that's one area that we've got to work on.
Matt Wells and Tim Potter in Lynn, Massachusetts represent a new generation of local NAACP leaders.
I think the younger generation feels that the NAACP is a bourgeois organization of professionals that are not concerned with what happens in the day-to-day lives of poor people and people on the streets. And that's not true.
Potter is doing what he says the national organization should do.
So we have come here today to...
Potter offers classes on how to take civil service tests and apply for jobs. Nationally, the NAACP has programs promoting black employment and academic excellence. It is an organization with a rich history, but it's only history to millions of young blacks.
These gaps nowadays within our communities, they can't be filled with "we shall overcome." We must now be there and add some credible solutions and begin to work with those who need our assistance.
If the NAACP is to grow, it must answer the question posed by a new generation. What have you done for us lately? Bob Kerr, NBC News, Washington.
When Nightly News continues in a moment, broadcasting baseball from a special point of view.
You're about to see a whole new side of Effordent. Introducing two-layered Effordent. The white side helps clean and deodorize with Arm & Hammer baking soda. The blue side also has more mint to provide more freshening power than ever before, making this the best Effordent ever. Introducing two-layered Effordent. Clean, fresh dentures come out of the blue. If your business gives up the quality of AT&T International Long Distance and calls Italy with someone else, here's your big savings.
3 coins in the fountain.
Leaving AT&T doesn't make a lot of sense.
California prunes are perfect for lunch. They taste great, they're easy to carry, and they're always in season. So you never run out of them.
Sweet, delicious California prunes. Find out how good they really are.
Green, green, it's green, they say, on the far side of the hill. Green, green, I'm going away to where the grass is greener still.
This consistently green moment was brought to you by Scott's Turf Builder and all the professionals who rely on Scott's. Scott's Turf Builder isn't like ordinary fertilizers. It has all 3 primary nutrients in every granule for even feeding, even growing, and even greening. There is a difference in fertilizers, the Scott's difference.
Growing up, Yvette Ortiz dreamed of making a difference.
But she soon learned all her intelligence and determination weren't enough to make it come true. She needed more. Anheuser-Busch believes everyone deserves a chance to realize their dreams. That's why for the last 10 years, they've been the leading supporter of the National Hispanic Scholarship Fund. Because helping people like Yvette means helping so many more.
Monty Python's Michael Palin is back in a new movie.
And we'll take you behind the scenes of LA Law with Michael Tucker and Jill Eikenberry.
That and more tomorrow morning on Today.
With the arrival of spring, the arrival of baseball. It's a game of so much more than 18 players on a field of green with 90 feet between bases. A game, after all, of sounds and movements, expectations, descriptions from the men in the play-by-play booth. Tonight, NBC's Mike Leonard on two who see the games in a special way.
1-2 change-up.
They are two young baseball announcers who make you view this game in a different way. Look at that bird on top of the flagpole. See how the lights glow against the early evening sky. Stare in amazement at the sight of Jim Lucas and Don Wardlow as they describe this spring training action.
Grounded hard.
But first, know this about Mr. Wardlow.
Can't see the game. Hasn't seen a thing in his life.
He's blind, but also admittedly blindly in love with the sounds of baseball.
I was captured by them at the age of 8, and I've never been free of them since.
Most baseball announcers check in for work during pregame drills. Not Jim and Don. They get to the ballpark a full 6 hours before the first pitch, just so they can get a feel for the game.
Maybe you can tell the difference between here and here. Put some in your hand. You are now touching first.
They met during college and determined that they would make it together or not make it at all.
A lot of people say, oh, look at what you're doing for him. And I say, wait, it's not for, it's with. Look at what he's doing for me. Jorgensen, 200, 5, 15.
The extra time it takes to read Don the stats helps Jim commit them to memory. By lending him his eyes, he sees what others overlook.
And then you go all the way up to there.
This sight, indeed, is different.
And there are people in baseball who have to be educated in the fact that, yes, this particular blind man can do what he sets out to do. And I hope someday that people will say of me, he's a good broadcaster who happens to be blind. So that's the first RBI for Lance Johnson over the course of this spring.
This year, Jim and Don will be calling games for the minor league New Britain, Connecticut Red Sox. Their dream is to one day move on to the majors. In a sense, though, they've already arrived.
I'm a baseball broadcaster. I'm a professional baseball broadcaster.
And Wardlow sprinting back, Wardlow back, Wardlow back, Wardlow with the wall, Wardlow reaching up. He makes the grab.
Mike Leonard, NBC News, Fort Myers, Florida.
Very simple billboard.
That's a home run in anyone's game. And that's Nightly News for this Wednesday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Standing tall above the rest. Dave Winfield, thank you for being my guest.
My pleasure.
Other catchers the White Sox have here tonight, Matt Marullo, and two non-roster catchers, Rick Rona and Joe Hall. Not to be confused with Joe B. Hall, the Kentucky basketball coach.
The crime that shocked a nation. But what really happened? Startling new evidence blows the lid off the murder of Martin Luther King. A new unsolved mystery. Then, anything can happen on a hot April night.
Wish it would rain.
But snow.
That's you to drop in.
Homicide after Unsolved Mysteries, NBC Wednesday.